Welcome to the solutions video for IXL Skill 12, Category E, Number 1, Rational Functions, Asymptotes at Excluded Values. So we'll click through the links, making very sure that we are logged in. So it should have welcome and your name, otherwise you're going to get cut off after 10 questions, and I, as the teacher, will not be able to see those. So we're looking at asymptotes and excluded values. Remember, asymptotes are vertical, horizontal, or other lines that the graph can get arbitrarily close to, but will never actually reach. The excluded values are points along the x-axis where the graph has no value. So here at x equals -5, we have a vertical asymptote. You could draw a vertical line at x equals -5. This graph will never cross it, but it get as close as you want. There's a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. So the equation of the vertical asymptote is x equals -5. Now here our horizontal asymptote, the line this can get close to but never cross, is at y equals 6. So remember, vertical lines are x equals, horizontal lines are y equals. Horizontal asymptote here is y equals 0. This vertical asymptote is at x equals -4. That is the vertical line it will never cross. The vertical asymptote, the vertical line it never crosses, is x equals -1. Now we need both asymptotes. So the horizontal line goes side to side, all the x values, so every possible x value, but only the y, or the only y allowed, is y equals -2. So a horizontal asymptote has an equation y equals because the y information completely determines what that line is. The vertical is at x equals 3. The vertical asymptote here, x equals 0. The excluded value here is again the x-coordinate of the vertical asymptote. So that's x equals -6. Horizontal asymptote here is at y equals 2. Now the horizontal asymptote here is at y equals -6. And the vertical is at x equals 0. The excluded value, the point at which the graph will never be found, is x equals -2. Now the vertical asymptote here, the point that's excluded, is the point where we have division by 0. So if x plus 8 equals 0, then x must equal -8. Right, so if we do that with a scratch pad, we'll leave it as black. If we have x plus 8 equals 0, then x equals -8. But we're actually looking at the inequalities here. But that's the value of our vertical asymptote. Now the horizontal asymptote. What happens when x gets as large as we want? So if x goes to infinity, 1 over infinity is pretty much 0. So that becomes y equals 0. Now this horizontal asymptote, when x goes to infinity, this first fraction goes to 0, but then we subtract 1. So here the horizontal asymptote is y equals -1. Again, horizontal asymptote here, the whole fraction goes to 0. So that's a y equals -4. The vertical asymptote is the point at which we are dividing by 0. That's at x equals -5. And what is the excluded value for this? That's where our denominator equals 0. So I think for the excluded value, they don't want the equation. They just want the value, 5 over 2. The vertical asymptote here is at x equals -3. That's where we would be dividing by 0. here the horizontal asymptote, as x goes to infinity, this goes to 0. So that's y equals 9. And the vertical is when that denominator is 0, which is x equals 0, because x is the only thing in our denominator. The excluded value for here is 7. X is not allowed to be 7. That's what makes our denominator equal 0. The horizontal asymptote, x goes to infinity, this fraction becomes 0, and we effectively have y equals 8. This vertical asymptote is where x equals -2. The excluded value here is where our denominator would be 0. That's at x equals 5 over 9. The excluded value here is at 0. Notice that the numerator has no impact on the excluded value. It's only the denominator that matters. Finally, this excluded value is also 0. So that completes our solutions for IXL 12E1, rational functions about asymptotes and excluded values.